Well, officially, hello everyone. I think we're ready to get started. So thanks to everyone for joining us today. And I'm super pleased to welcome our friends from Ignion and MassMelt to our presentation, which I'm personally pretty excited about, to be honest, mostly because this here is arguably the question we at Blues hear the most from the customers of our cellular connectivity product, the note card. And I feel like until today, I really didn't have a lot of fantastic answers to provide. I'm sure I will after our presentation today. So I hope to learn about antenna technology just as much as you all. Excuse me. Speaking of questions, please post those in the Q&A panel or the chat panel. Either one is fine, provided through the Zoom interface. You can ask them as they pop into your head today. This is going to be a pretty casual conversation today. I'll be interrupting John and Joshua, our other speakers, and they will interrupt me, and we will, have more of a conversation than sort of a speaking at you kind of presentation. But I will say we always get this question: is this being recorded? And the answer is absolutely yes. It is being recorded, and it will be available on the Blues YouTube channel at this URL. While you're there, I always recommend subscribing to the channel so you get the latest and greatest video content that we're putting together. So what's on tap for today? Well, I know that some of you are new to Blues and new to how we approach wireless IoT. So I'm going to provide a really quick overview of what Blues is all about. But really the meat of the content is going to be provided by John from Ignion. And we are very fortunate to have a mutual customer of both Blues and Ignion from MassMelt, who's going to speak to his successes using both product lines together. So let's get to introductions. So my name is Rob Lauer. I'm Director of Developer Relations here at Blues. Far more importantly, with me today is the aforementioned John Carpenter from Ignion. John, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah. As Rob said, hello everybody. John Carpenter. I'm the head of sales for the Americas for Ignion. So basically the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and here to give anybody any support you need with antenna selection and design.
Awesome. And just as importantly, Joshua Wilcox from MassMelt. Joshua, you want to do a intro, please?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm Yasha. I run a product development firm called MassMelt, and we do turnkey product developments. We like to focus in the areas of industrial IoT, electrification, and automation. And that tends to need a lot of antennas and connectivity.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right, so you Blues veterans on the call, bear with me for a moment as I introduce the rest of you to Blues. If I can boil down our mission into one statement, it's to simplify wireless connectivity, full stop. How do we approach that? Well, one of our main focuses is on securing your data from the moment it's acquired by a sensor, for instance, all the way to landing on your cloud application of choice. All of our hardware solutions are also low power out of the box, and we're talking as low as 8 microamps when idle for the cellular note card. We're also very much a developer-focused company. Our developer experience has always been a top priority of ours, and you'll see that kind of played out through our elegant and really easy-to-use JSON-based APIs. And also, all of our hardware is swappable in terms of physical connectors and the developer APIs, so you can effectively have different radio access technologies in the field, all using the same firmware code base. And you'll hear us talk about this concept of wireless harmonization a lot. This is really the idea that product builders should be able to choose the right radio access technology for them, for their products, to build their connected solutions without making upfront commitments, without painting themselves into a corner. And that idea really maps to our Blues product line very well. We feel like you should be able to have the choice of radio access technology, right, without changing a single line of code, which you can do with the note card. And when you're choosing or you're even changing a RAT or radio access technology, you should have confidence they're fully swappable, right? Likewise, if you everyone needs to future-proof their deployments, right? So someday in the not too distant future, for example, 4G is going to sunset. That's a reality. Now it's not going to be next year. It's down the road, but it's a reality, right? And when it does, you'll want swappable connectivity, whether it's like a 5G note card or a satellite note card. I'm not announcing any of that today, but you know what I mean. And it's also not necessarily about picking one RAT today, but having the option to switch between them programmatically, which you can do with our note card that includes cellular and Wi-Fi on the same board. So speaking of, This is the mystical note card. This one in particular is one with a dual cellular and Wi-Fi on board. The cellular side does come prepaid with 500 megabytes of data, 10 years of global service baked into the cost of the device. Cool thing about the note card is there's no subscription fees, there's no monthly SIM fees, no data fees. But the note card is really only half the story. The other half is our cloud service that we call NoteHub. And the two work together to form what we call a device to cloud data pump. Now, what does that mean for you in practice? Well, you are going to say buy a starter kit from us, hook up one of your sensors to it, start reading data with the host microcontroller, and then deliver that data securely over cellular to NoteHub. And NoteHub will then route that data to your cloud. So to be clear, NoteHub is a cloud service. It's a secure proxy for the note card to communicate with, but we're not trying to create a platform that locks you in. We exist to help you connect to your platform. That platform might be AWS, Azure, an IoT platform like DataCake, UbiDots, Losant, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We are really trying to focus on solving this kind of messy middle piece of connectivity so that you can really easily and securely connect your devices to your cloud apps. But there's a lot of note card options, as I've already alluded to. And again, they're all fully swappable, but we do provide a cellular-only note card. It's a great option if you need Cat1, LTE-M, or NB-IoT cellular access. There is a Wi-Fi only note card. It's based on the ESP32S3 chip. There's also an upcoming new LoRa only note card that should be available either by the end of the year or early next year. And as the aforementioned dual cellular and Wi-Fi note card. With that one, you can use either cell or Wi-Fi, or ideally you set up this Wi-Fi to cellular fallback. So if Wi-Fi fails, the note card will fall back on cellular. And just to zoom in on the capabilities of the note card a little bit more, it is a low power system on module, measures a tiny 30 by 35 or 30 by 42 millimeters, depending on the note card. Does have an M.2 edge connector for embedding in your project. As already mentioned, there's cellular, Wi-Fi, LoRa variants of the note card. I want to point out that the cellular ones offer GPS access as well, GPS module. Already mentioned this, cellular note card comes prepaid, 500 megs of data, 10 years of service. You can top up note cards with more data if needed. The note card also has an onboard eSIM, but provides dual SIM support and the ability to switch between them if needed. This would only come up if you're trying to use the note card in a country we don't support, which there are just a couple, or 2, 3, 4 big ones, most notably Brazil, India, China. Those are probably the 3 biggest ones. And the API, the way you interact with the note card is all JSON. So you're not actually using AT commands to manage your cellular radio, to manage your connection. It's all JSON-based commands. And to use that JSON-based API, we provide SDKs for popular embedded languages as well. And as already mentioned, the cellular note card varieties work on popular cellular standards like NB-IoT, LTE-M, and Cat1. Now, to make it easier to use your note card when you're prototyping, or frankly, when you're ready to embed in a more permanent solution, we provide these carrier boards, these development boards called note carriers. With a note carrier, you can snap in a note card and connect it to really any solution you can dream up. The note carrier F, for example, includes a feather-compatible socket for a feather Adafruit feather host. The A model, which is probably my favorite one, if you look closely, it's got onboard antennas there from our friends at Ignion. It's also got headers that let you hook it up to virtually any microcontroller you want. There's also the note carrier B. It's a very small form factor note carrier, hardly larger than the note card itself. I'll note that these images are not to scale. The note carrier Pi, we actually just released a new revision of the note carrier Pi hat. It's for working with any Raspberry Pi compatible single board computer. And SparkFun. SparkFun recently released a micromod cellular function board, which lets you use the note card with their micromod ecosystem. And actually, even more recently, our friends from Rack Wireless released Blues.1, which lets you use the note card with their WISP-block ecosystem. So to sum it all up, I want to be super clear that when you choose Blues, you're not just choosing the note card. With Blues, it is really possible to develop a single solution that can be deployed with any host, with cellular, Wi-Fi, and or LoRa, and not jump through a lot of hoops to get you there. Not only that, but that single solution really with its multiple deployments still has the benefit of communicating with a single cloud service, that being NoteHub, which acts as a pipeline to your ultimate cloud application. So using the note card and NoteHub enables this seamless workflow However, this seamless workflow cannot happen without connectivity and antennas to enable that connectivity. In fact, antenna tech is so important to us and our customers. We had to create this massive guide to help people diagnose their own connectivity issues because it can change based on a myriad of factors, right? Like enclosure type, location in the world, or hyperlocal location, which carrier you're using, what network type, all these factors come into play, which is why we love our friends at Ignion so much. And frankly, we've put our money where our mouth is, if you will, as it's pretty clear we're heavily invested in Ignion. We've incorporated Ignion antennas not only on the new Cell Plus Wi-Fi note card, but also on our Note Carrier A. And I will honestly say, after we released this revision of the Note Carrier A, our support requests related to cellular connectivity plummeted. It just worked out of the box for people all over the world, whether connecting to NB-IoT, LTM, or Cat1. This antenna selection was a massively beneficial choice for us. And with that, what I'd like to do is hand the controls over to John Carpenter. Actually, I'll keep running the slides. John, if you want to take over the speaking duties.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. And as Rob was sort of indicating there, the combination of Blues and Ignion, our goal is to give you a building block process for the antenna portion of the RF circuit to make the design and layout of your board much easier. So we have a technology solution that lends itself well to that. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to give you a very quick company overview. I'll talk about the differences between our antenna solution and other chip antenna solutions, a little bit about our online design and support process. And then also we have engineering support all the way through the process. We'll talk about that a bit and then have some time for questions. So who is Ignion? Ignion is a relatively young company. We've been around for about 5 years. Our technology, though, has been around for actually more than 20 years at this point. So we come from Fractus Antennas, who developed fractal antenna technology. So they've been using this technology for quite a long time successfully. It generally is used in cell phones and other very high volume IoT products. When they developed a chip antenna version of that fractal technology, they spun Ignion off into a separate company. So the technology's been around for quite a while, but the company itself is relatively new. That being said, in the 5 years that we've been in business, we're already the #1 selling chip antenna in the world. That's not counting flex circuit antennas or external antennas or anything like that, but in the chip antenna world, we're already selling more than anybody else. So as we like to say, that red wave is coming. Our antennas are all red in color. Generally speaking, being a chip antenna, our stuff is used in IoT devices, industrial IoT, asset tracking, fleet management, all sorts of sensor devices and things like that. Generally speaking, things that are more or less about 1 inch by 1 inch in circuit board size, up to maybe I've seen them as big as about 300 millimeters in size, but generally speaking, small IoT devices. You can go ahead. So we talked earlier about the questions that the Blue sees, meaning which antenna to use. When it comes to the antenna, if you remember nothing else from today, we'd like you to consider the antenna first. When we say that, we don't expect you to start your design with the antenna. You're going to pick a type of device. You'll have a protocol, probably a radio, and maybe you've already hooked up with Blues. When we say consider the antenna first, we're talking about the layout of your PCB. If you'll consider the antenna placement and selection first, you'll solve yourself a multitude of problems going on. Your life will be much easier. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, and we can illustrate that a bit. Obviously, you can see the 1-10-100 rule here, but if you start with the layout and selection of the antenna, you can have a relatively trouble-free design process. The further you go into your process before selecting and placing that antenna, it's going to cost you a lot more in time and money, and you may get to the end, and we see this all the time, where somebody does their board layout and then at the end goes to add in an antenna, and it causes them to completely redo their design or forces them into something like having to use an external antenna or an FPC, which there are trade-offs in using those types of products. If you consider the selection and placement of your antenna first, you save yourself a lot of trouble. Go ahead. So the drivers for choosing antenna, what type of device, where is it going to be used? Is it going to be worn on the human body or mounted on a metal shipping container? what's the size of your device, of course, the frequencies and protocols you're using. We aim to help with have a lower power device along with blues. And of course, cost is always a factor as well. With all these different things out there, basically, we can help you if you let us know the protocol you're using, the specific frequency band, and the size of your PCB. We can start you off on your design journey and coach you all the way to the end. Go ahead. So we actually call our antenna components, it's a chip antenna. We actually call it a virtual antenna. The main difference being that our antennas do not have a native frequency. We set the frequency on your PCB along with the ground plane and a small matching network. So that's the key difference between our antenna and other chip antennas. They generally, our IP protects a non-resonant antenna in a chip component. So our competitors will have a specific frequency band in their antennas. They're also generally made of ceramic, where ours are FR4, and we'll get into a little bit about what that means later on. Of course, other options that are out there, antennas have been around for a long time with 3D print and metal trace antennas and FBCs. We can go more if there are any questions on why you would pick a chip antenna. We can go into that in more detail later on.
Yeah, John, I get to be the one to ask the stupid questions here. Can you dive in a little bit more about what makes a virtual antenna different from a chip antenna?
So it gets right at the heart of our IP. That the main difference is that our chip antennas do not have a specific frequency. Our antennas are good basically anywhere from 450 megahertz to about 10.6 gig. We do have some cases where we go higher or lower than that, depending on the size of the board and what else is around it and things like that. But the fact that we don't have a native frequency is the main difference with our part versus others.
Makes sense. Thank you.
It looks like we maybe lost the slide view there.
Still up for me. Anywhere else?
Looks good in this end.
Oh no, it was never mind. That was on my computer. Something popped up in front of it. I apologize. Okay, so what is the Ignion solution? It's really a two-part solution. It's partly the technology of our boards, and it's also the online simulation and support that we give. So the technology, as I said, we have a non-resonant antenna, a virtual antenna. We tune that antenna to the specific frequency band that you're looking for with a matching network on the board, and basically it's capturing the resonance of the ground plane in your circuit board. So that's the physical structure and technology of our parts. The second part of it is we have an online antenna design tool, our AIC, or an antenna intelligence cloud, that allows you to, as I said, put in your frequency protocol and board size, and it will give you a performance estimate to tell you what the capability of your design is before you do any plastic, metal, make any prototypes. So you've got an idea of what you can do with that design, and you know in advance you might need to make a slightly bigger board or select a different type of antenna, one of the different ones that we have, but it can help you do that through simulation rather than prototypes up front.
So, John, I'm always skeptical of tools like this. Like, how accurate are these estimates? So what's been your
so the number we talk about is they're generally about 95% accurate. So what we give you is basically a bare board simulation. So you're not having your radio on the board and the other components, you don't have an enclosure, and it's not in its physical operating environment. There can be 5% or so of discrepancy in what we predict in the performance for the final product. We do coach through the design, and one of the key benefits of our parts, because it doesn't have a native frequency, it will detune with the addition of the other components, the enclosure and the environment. But because we don't have a specific native frequency, we can retune that right back to the center of the target frequency, where another antenna also will detune, but it may go far enough outside of the range of that specific part that you actually have to change your antenna component and possibly redo your layout, or even change the part number that you're using. So as I said, we're about 95% accurate with our simulations, but there is fine tuning needed at the end to bring you back to your target frequency.
Correct.
So our being not non-frequency specific parts, our portfolio of products is actually pretty simple. We have 6 different antennas. The reason we have the 6, although any of them can be tuned to any of the that 450 to 10.6 gig, The difference is we have antennas that are best for a specific frequency band based on the size of your product and the other materials around it. Generally speaking, our smaller antennas, the three on the left, they're generally best for higher frequencies, and then the three on the right are generally better for lower frequencies. We also have the second one in, the Duo is a 2-port device, and the one on the far right, the Trio, is a 3-port device. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. If you want to have a couple different protocols on your board, you can do that with one antenna.
Can you tune any of these to more than one frequency?
Yes, but to take a single port device, for example, you would need to put a switch on the board. But yes, that antenna can be used for multiple frequencies.
Okay, cool.
So just a little bit of an example for what our AIC process looks like. So this is our online design tool. So I circled the three main components on the left. The protocol, if that's LoRa or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or whatever, give us the protocol, the frequency band or bands that you're looking for, and the size of your board. And within a couple of minutes, you'll get back a design report like what you see here. It will select which of our antennas will give you the best performance. It'll give you the ideal placement on the size of board that you give us. It'll also give you the layout for the tuning network and the specific values that we recommend in that bare board application. So that will give you a performance report to tell you what to expect as the maximum performance for your board. It'll also give you some general design recommendations about how to place the battery and how much clearance area you need and what the traces should look like. We'll give you some general information there, but that again is all in a bare board environment. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit more about where we take that journey from there. So the box on the far left, the feasibility, that's our online AIC tool. You can do that as many times as you like, and we get customers that do things. For example, they'll put in 4 different board sizes with the frequency and protocol being the same, and that way they can simulate which board size is ideal for their products. Rather than making 4 different prototypes, simulate in advance, and it'll tell you where you need to go to get your best performance. But that's where our process starts. So that's a free service you can use as much as you want. From there, we engage with our FAE team. If you want to, populate your design in a Gerber file or a step file with the rest of your components, your radio, your enclosure, all that kind of stuff, we will for free review those Gerbers and let you know if with the addition of those products, we may have additional suggestions on which antennas is going to be best, what the placement is, what the traces look like, and things like that. We'll also give you advice, as I said before, on the placement of your battery and other things to help you to have a software-based design that is designed for best possible performance. We can run complex simulations. If, for example, you have something that can be worn on the human body, that's got a big effect on performance, just as if you're going to mount it on a metal shipping container, that also affects the RF performance. So we can do simulations of that nature. They're much more complex. When we get to that level, we do charge it. It's generally $1,000 per simulation, but we can help with those more complex simulations if you need them. With all that done, you are ready to go to a prototype that you can confidently move ahead as the one and only prototype that you'll need to do. But you make the prototype. If you're with a company that has RF expertise and you can do that final tuning yourself, we can coach you through that process to an extent. We also do offer a service where we will charge to take your final device in its enclosure, put it in our chamber. We'll measure it in the chamber in its actual usage environment, mounted on a wall, on a container, on human body, whatever. So we'll measure it and make that final fine tuning of the performance to get you to your optimal performance. Again, that is a paid service when we actually test those devices. Generally speaking, that's about $3,500 per antenna. Versus other companies that I've worked with to get that level of engineering support, you're normally talking about $25,000 in NRE. So it still is a one prototype, easy design process, and much cheaper if you do need our support with that actual tuning process. So this is just a little visual representation of the difference in the design journey with an Ignion antenna versus one of our competitors. With somebody who has a specific resonant antenna, generally they'll select a component, lay out a board, make a prototype, test it, see what your performance is. If your performance is not what you're looking for, it involves doing another iteration of prototype tuning, again, seeing if you're there yet. Sometimes it needs a different size component. So again, changing the layout of the board. that can be 3 or 4 different iterations of prototype, where with the simulation capability that's native to the non-resident antenna that we have, generally speaking, we'll do the layout, help you with your Gerbers, build your prototypes, and then we'll do that tuning. It's one round of prototypes, so it takes literally months out of the process of developing that RF circuit.
Do you have any like metrics for high level estimates for time saved on the average project, or is that too difficult to estimate?
Yeah, I don't think we have any actual metrics. In my experience, I've seen some projects where I would say on average, most of the projects we work with, it seems like they go probably an average of 1 year from concept to actually having that design finished and in production. I've seen some headset projects, for example, go from customer calls in with an idea, get started, does a simulation, and 4 to 5 months later, they're actually in production with a contract manufacturer. So it can cut the design time and the launch time in half from what I've seen. Again, of course, it depends on the complexity of the design. The other thing that I've seen affected honestly is we make recommendations on what that layout should look like. In some cases, customers either don't follow it. In some cases, they can't. Right? They've got size constraints in the product. They might need a larger battery, which makes it more difficult. So it depends on how closely you can follow our recommendations. So sometimes physics say that you can't. In those cases, it can take a little bit longer. But as I said, generally speaking, I see it cutting the design process in half.
Cool. Well,
Yeah, just to speak to that for a moment as well, I would also characterize it, especially relating to this slide, on the number of board spins required to get there. So in our experience, it's definitely saved, sometimes at least one, maybe multiple spins where we're actually getting there or extremely close in the first try in a way that would be, as shown here, very costly and lengthy. In terms of the actual time, that's really a function of how quickly your entire board spin test cycle is, which is completely depends on your organization and how fast you want to go and all of that. So it's really about saving spins is what I would say in our experience.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joshua. So this slide just kind of sums up the differences and the benefits of our virtual antenna. As I said, the real difference in our product versus other chip antennas, we have this patented non-resonant antenna structure. So if you're using an antenna that does not have a set frequency in a chip antenna format, that is covered by our IT. We certainly have seen some companies that have made attempts to copy us. And we do have through practice, we've got a strong IP wing that goes after them. But that non-resonant antenna structure is key to the difference in our part, and that gives you the flexibility to do multiple frequencies, or having one antenna to cover multiple frequencies. So you can have one SKU for worldwide coverage, for example, or if you have a product that you want to have certified with both AT&T and Verizon and maybe T-Mobile as well, your board layout doesn't have to change. The tuning network components, the value of those might change a bit, but your board layout stays the same. So it makes it very, very, very simple. So that's at the heart of the difference with our product from an antenna structure. It also lends itself that the physical construction of our parts is actually very, very simple. It's basically FR4 material with copper traces on the inside, and there's a lot more to the IP, but it's a simple structure. The value of that is it does allow the size of our components to be generally smaller than our competitors. Also being very simple materials, we saw no lead time issues through all the COVID and all the changes and issues we've had in the world in the last several years. Our lead time never went above 8 to 10 weeks. It's very, very simple material. And also with that simple material, it lends itself to a very low cost for the antennas. We do price by volume. So depending on the volume of your product, that will have an effect on it. But comparing our antennas to a competitive antenna, the cost is going to be generally much more attractive. The other part of our value, as I talked about, is our online design tool. Of course, that takes the risk out of the development and makes your design process much easier and faster. Beyond that initial simulation, honestly, aside from the flexibility of our product, what I hear most from our customers is the difference in our engineering support. We can help customers from the very beginning all the way through to the end of the design. That's really the most common thing, again, that I hear is at the end of the process, they'll say, look, you guys helped me through this process from start to finish. We have a product that works well. We got it done quickly. And some of these customers are not large customers. And the real difference that I've seen with some competitors that I've worked for, they're all very good companies, but generally others are going to give free engineering support to somebody that's building cell phones or computer motherboards or something that's running in the millions. We're able to give that initial simulation and that engineering support start to finish to really anybody who needs it. So it's a big value for customers. And then the other final difference with our antennas versus others is all antennas get detuned when you add in the other components and put it in its working environment. One of the key differences with ours is once it's detuned with the matching network, we can bring it right back to that target frequency without having to change the layout or the physical component device. But it, again, makes your process much easier. In the end, we can give you custom antenna performance, an easy design process, and the benefit for you mainly is we'll help you get your product out to market much faster. We can take any specific antenna questions now, or we can do it at the end of the entire program. Either way is fine. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yash, I want to give you a chance to speak up as well, provide your kind of take on all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to speak to why we really love both the Blues and Ignion solution and some of the products that we've developed. We're generally serving clients that are pretty early stage, or maybe a larger company that's a larger software company that's building hardware for the first time. So one of the things that matters a lot with many of the things we're building is time to market and flexibility. And those things can both be very incompatible or challenging to be compatible with hardware. So we're always looking for components and solutions that really allow both of those needs to be met. Why are these two things meeting those needs? So the first one is, as we were talking about with the Blue solution, we're able to go through a myriad of different connectivities with the same M.2 slot. That really helps a lot, especially for the early stage prototypes and proof of concept devices. A lot of those devices, because when we're doing an NPI, new product introduction, we really are concerned with getting a working demo or a proof of concept device, and that's usually going to be what we call works like. And then later on in the process, we're going to have a looks like that actually might be the form factor for the end product. And eventually, we need to merge those two things together. When we're working on products in the industrial space, not always, but generally, they're going to be a little bit larger and more forgiving, where we don't necessarily have to use super compact antennas in these things. But when we're working on consumer products or something that's a bit higher volume, we need to be very cognizant and sensitive to the form factor and size. And this is where Ignion has really been helpful for us, because a lot of other antenna solutions are going to be very large volume. They're going to work in the proof of concept device. But then when we actually need to get to the form factor and go to mass production, we need to have a compact solution. And the ability to simulate that solution early on in the process, before we've even made a first PCB, we've made first copper, has been extremely helpful. And that's the AIC tool that John was mentioning. And the really cool thing about that is, one, it's free. And what's that mean? You can run it as many times as you want. And so when we're actually integrating this proof of concept device that may be a larger form factor, larger enclosure, or just laid out on a kind of a flat prototype board, this allows us to integrate our system and explore different layouts of the antennas in the volume that's available and simulate each one. And that can really be a huge win, because as was shown, the further you get down the line, every stop gate that you go through in hardware, it gets more and more expensive to fix. And if you're going to production, hopefully not, but if you're going to a production with a subpar or non-optimal design, you're making copies of a bug that gets put out into the world. So every unit you ship is another problem that has to be resolved. And the thing about antennas is you can't really OTA fix you an antenna. Firmware is something that sometimes you can fix with an OTA, but antennas just simply are not. Once the device is produced, there's no going back. I did want to speak though to the flexibility, especially we were talking about the note card that can go between different connectivity technologies. The thing that's really cool about this virtual antenna is we can retune it for multiple bands. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the implications of that. So let's say we have a product that's looking to have a cellular connectivity technology. We design the board, we run it through the AIC, and we tune it up for a particular carrier. Let's say it's AT&T. So there's a number of bands. There's actually cellular. Out of all the connectivity solutions we're talking about here, cellular has a crazy number of bands, and it's extraordinarily complex. So we'll tune up our antenna for AT&T. We'll ship our product. Customer likes it. It's going really well. Let's say they approach us and they're like, okay, we want to have a LoRa version of this product now. The really interesting thing is we could potentially use the exact same PCBA with the same Ignion antenna. We can just retune it using the matching network component selection. And then we could very quickly, get going with the LoRa version of the note card and actually deploy the product in the same physical form factor that's been retuned to that band. And that really has been the power for us on several programs.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thanks, Yasha. We have just want to share a few resources here as we get into more of the Q&A. We have a lot of questions, and I think what I'll do is just kind of pop around here. I think, let me see here. There's a question that came in earlier from Clark about your antennas do not have any capacitance or inductance. That's the question.
I'm not an engineer. My understanding is no, that's handled through the matching network. But I may have to go back to engineering and get a more specific answer for that. I don't want to give any bad information out.
Okay, sure. And there's a question, do you still have to define the frequency band in software for the antenna?
I think that's more not for the antenna, but I think that might be more related to the radio.
Okay.
Yeah, I would generally say that's going to be governed by the radio. Like if there's always, we've got an antenna, a matching network, and a radio. The radio is going to govern the bands required on the antenna. So that's going to be determined by your radio that you're using.
And someone had asked earlier, is the AIC antenna intelligence cloud, is it free to use? And
that's an easy one.
Yeah.
Always free. Use it as often as you'd like, free every time.
Can confirm.
Somebody asked, can a single antenna be used for cellular, Wi-Fi, and BLE using multiplexers, perhaps?
It can, depending on the performance that you're looking for and the layout of the board and things like that. Sometimes that's the optimal design. Sometimes we'll have you use maybe a dual port antenna and a single port, and sometimes we'll separate them. We certainly see designs that have 3 or 4 antennas on there. It really depends on your design. So the short answer is yes, it can, but we'll work with you to determine what's the performance level that you need. And then there are, of course, cost trade-offs with using one trio antenna or maybe 3 nano antennas, which are very, very inexpensive. Depending on your needs for the total product, that might be the right answer or it might not, but we can help you through that with both simulation and engineering coaching.
I want to mention for the multi-band implementation, I think there's a Nordic Thingy would be a reference design I'd suggest checking out that shows the Ignion antenna getting switched in several bands.
Yep.
Another question about the AIC. Do you have any, do you have any simulations in specific enclosures by any chance?
So we do, we can do simulations for specific enclosures. We do have a large database of designs that we've done. So if somebody has a question on and putting this in a metal enclosure or some other material, we can certainly give advice there. The AIC itself doesn't consider the enclosure. It's a bare PCB product. Through the Gerber reviews, step files, and engineering support, we can simulate the performance with whatever enclosure you have there.
I do want to tell a little enclosure story that people might find interesting. I had a friend working on a asset tracker product, and the product, they designed the board and the antenna, and it was working great, and it was working with the app and everything. And then they went to put it in the final housing, and they actually, for various reasons, needed to have a potting or overmold material. If anybody isn't familiar with that, it's like a resin material that waterproofs and ruggedizes the board, but it's like literally plastic that's covering the entire board. So they went to reuse this PCB that was now covered in this plastic, and they could only get it to connect about 6 inches away when it was working for hundreds of feet before. And so what had happened was their antenna had been completely detuned by the final production intent enclosure. Really cool thing about the Ignion antenna here is that tuning is largely determined by the matching network, which are actual components. And so instead of having to do a whole new board spin, you could literally, with your SMT rework station, retune the antenna with the correct component matching network, and then make another prototype with the resin and get your design working.
Lots of questions coming in. Just make sure I'm not missing anything here. Can you talk about typical antenna sensitivity values and output power? How does that compare to traditional antennas?
So our devices are typically low power for better battery performance. I personally can't speak specifically to what those values are. I can certainly go offline and set somebody up with a discussion with one of our apps engineers.
There's a question that's specific. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that answer is, as any engineer would say, it depends.
Yeah.
And it's highly dependent on the specific configuration of your PCBA and what you can get with the matching network. So you'll just have to run an AIC to determine what efficiency you're going to hit.
Thanks, Josh.
There's a question, what are the situations where an external antenna would perform better than your chip antenna, excluding the obvious situations where the device and antenna must be widely separated for some reason?
So the obvious one for me is if somebody has a full metal enclosure, there's not a window for that RF signal to get out. You have to go to an external antenna. That is one that we see. I don't think real often, but people have, for example, trackers that they want to put inside of a metal shipping container. Then they're going to have an external antenna with a cable to get that antenna at least on the outside of the box. In that case, no chip antenna, not just Ignion, no chip antenna would work.
Somewhat related to that, somebody asked another question about enclosures. How does the performance compare to an external antenna if the unit is in an ABS plastic case?
ABS is not a problem for us.
Okay.
The other thing I'd mention, oh, sorry.
I just say the specific performance with an external antenna. That antenna can be various sizes and things like that, so it's hard to compare the actual performance difference. It depends on what antenna you're using, but plastic enclosures are actually what we hope to see.
Yeah, as for the actual performance, the answer is always going to be it depends on the simulation. But the thing I would say about external antennas is, and at least in our experience, there's a lot of cases where it's actually a huge win to get rid of an external antenna from an assembly cost perspective. Because once you have to drill holes in your enclosure, you have to have an assembly step to put the antenna on. That compared to the board showing up with an antenna already on it can itself be a huge win.
Related to this, I'm assuming the answer is no, but the question is, when you say you can use these in metal enclosures, are you saying there is a way to make these work within a metal enclosure?
As long as you've got a sufficient window in that metal to get the RF signal out. If it's full metal 100%, then no antenna is going to get a signal outside that enclosure.
Your cell phone isn't going to work in a microwave. It's very RF tight. Got to cut a hole in there.
Let's see. Perhaps I missed the answer. Is it one antenna for GPS, cellular, and Wi-Fi?
It's possible with our trio antenna. It is a 3-port antenna. It's possible, but depending on the cost that you're looking for and the performance of each band, that might be the best solution, or it might make sense to separate into 2 or even 3 different antennas. But it is possible with our trio antenna.
The one thing I would kind of caution there is usually you are going to have multiple connectivity technologies on one antenna. You're going to need to multiplex them over time. So you can't do multiple things at the same time.
Right.
Meaning, if you're trying to get especially GPS, if you're trying to get a GPS fix, you're going to have to sit there and listen for your GPS signal, and you cannot use the antenna for anything else in that period.
Right.
This question speaks to my ignorance. How close to 1-to-1 can the SWR be tuned? I don't know what the context is there, but
that one's beyond me. I don't know, Josh, if you can help with that, or I'll have to get back to somebody.
It depends on it depends. You gotta get your board outline, antenna placement, and run a simulation, because it's also a matter of not just the antenna. It's also a matter of the physical board layout and size and everything. Yeah.
see, Jim asked a question earlier. Have you a general recommendation for an antenna approach for the bands required for Amazon's sidewalk network? 1 multi-port or 2 antenna, etc.
So we actually have a design guide for Amazon Sidewalk. I don't think we show it here, but you can see the website, ignion.io. On our website, there's a multitude of design guides and application notes. Amazon Sidewalk is one of them. I'm not sure who answered that question, but if I'm sure Rob, they can probably send you an email if you want to forward that through. I will send that Amazon Sidewalk design guide to whoever asked that question.
Let's see. Mike just sent in the question: how do you avoid the cellular signal interfering with the GPS antenna?
That would be through a switch. And I don't know, Josh, if you want to expand on that, if you can.
Absolutely. So the easiest way is to just not run them at the same time. That's by far the easiest way, and that allows you to either use the same antenna, or even if you're using 2 different antennas, because otherwise GPS is actually it's very sensitive, and the less noise increases the performance of the GPS receiver. So ideally, you run them separately. If you need to run them at the same time, you're going to have 2 antennas. That's really by far going to be the easiest way.
Yeah, and when we have a design that requires 2 antennas, naturally we separate the physical location of those antennas generally as much as possible to stop them from interfering with each other.
And I
Yeah.
may be wrong, but I think that's one of the reasons that on the note card we don't allow for concurrent usage of cellular and GPS, even though some of the modems we use technically allow it, but could be wrong there, but it sounds right.
Yeah, and if anybody is wondering, like, why can my cell phone do that? And then we're saying that it's hard. It's because the amount of energy and time and design that goes into a smartphone is obscene. It's truly, and so that's why it can be done, but it's very complicated and takes a lot of time and expense.
John, here's a very forward-looking question. Do you have an antenna that works for swarm or myriada satellite networks?
So I'm not familiar. So generally, if it falls within the frequency band that 450 megahertz to 10.6 gig, the answer is yes. I'm not familiar with the specific frequency bands from those protocols, so I hesitate to answer for that reason. If they know that the frequency bands, that if they're within there, then the answer is yes.
Let's see. Dan just sent in a question related to the isolation time. Sorry, related to the isolation of time or distance on GPS operation. How long is the capture time for GPS on the note cards? My experience is it can be on a cold boot of the note card. It can be upwards of 2 to 3 minutes. But again, it's going to depend on a lot of different factors in terms of the visibility of the southern sky and quality of your antenna, of course, and other operations on in your if the cellular radio is active, you got to wait for that to go inactive and all that kind of those factors as well. So your mileage may vary.
The other thing I'd mention there is the note card. It actually knows how to talk to an external GPS receiver. So if you want to use a different GPS receiver that can maybe support more bands, the note card actually it knows how to talk with one without you writing any firmware.
Yeah,
And that
great
can
point.
provide a better time to fix and stuff.
All right, John, who would I contact to get who would I contact to get an example enclosure and PCB layout pairs as a start for a project at Ignion?
Easy way is come to me, and I'll either do it for them, or I'll route them to the right FAE.
Awesome. Um,
And then you can also obviously go do an AIC. If you do an AIC, you'll get your simulated board. You'll get your performance report, and you'll also get somebody from Ignion following up with you to see whether you have any questions or need any additional support. So the AIC is a quick way to get started.
awesome. I'm looking through the questions here. I think we got to all of them. I apologize if we missed anything, but if nobody has any more questions. Oh, sorry, one more from Mike. Did Ignion have any dev boards to allow us to try the solution early in development?
Yes, we have dev boards available for each of our antennas. We can supply those in some cases. The easy way to get one is, I think they're about $40. Go to DigiKey, Mouser, or Symmetry, our main distributors, and RFPD. Go to any of them, and you can have one on your way in 15 minutes from DigiKey for $40.
Cool. Uh, a
It
couple
is
more.
worth
No,
mentioning that the note carrier is also in its own way an Ignion dev board.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So if you want to use a note card, like you can with Ignion antennas, you can just get the note carrier A.
Yeah, I saw Francois had a question. Does no carrier Pi include Ignion antenna? No, only the no carrier A includes onboard antennas. The others come with external antennas. Uh, all right, I'm gonna cut us off here pretty soon. Oh, not see now the questions are rolling in again. Related to the onboard GPS feature on the note cards, what is the current requirement when GPS is active? I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'm almost guarantee it's in the data sheets for the note cards. If you go to blues.dev, you will be able to access our data sheets. Send power on the note cards. Again, I think that is in the data sheets as well, and it'd be in the same section. Um, I would make a guess, but I would get it wrong. How
One
soon?
comment I'd have about the send power that's actually pretty relevant to this piece is if you're building a highly compact device, such as a wearable device, one of the because the thing we didn't unfortunately get to talk about a lot was certification, and one of the really big deals with certification is some carriers actually require a minimum TX power. And so there's a minimum amount of radiated power that the device must be able to put out just so that it can actually connect to the network and not sit there and try to retry all the time. And that just creates noise if you have a device that like has a crappy antenna that is trying to retry all the time. So if you have a really small device, it can be challenging to get a good enough radiative efficiency to actually send the signal out to get to the tower. So it's actually really important. This is where actually the AIC has helped us a lot to see if we're there or not, to have a minimum TX power that's going to be required using the networks that even the note card is on. And that's a really big one because you could be passing in all other ways, but if the device can't radiate enough energy, it could be a challenge.
All right, one last question here, and it's for me. How soon will the note carrier A be resized for the new cards? So to be clear, the new cell plus Wi-Fi note cards are a little bit longer. They're 7 millimeters taller, if you will. And right now, the only note carriers that are not compatible with that are the A, which has the Ignion antennas, and the B, which is the small form factor. Those are both being reworked right now, so we're definitely going to have those. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think with the start of the year, we will have those, if not shortly after, within weeks, I believe.
Do you still sell the no carrier A without the headers soldered in?
We do, yes.
And you can just do that for now.
True. With that, I think we're good. I appreciate it. Thanks to everyone for attending. Thanks to our speakers, Yasha and John. This was fantastic. As a reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.